The gift of silence. When readers ask how I came to be a writer, I usually mention several influences. My parents teaching by example the importance of reading. A grandfather who, though illiterate, was a wonderful storyteller. And as I grew older, an awareness that my region had produced an inordinate number of excellent writers and that I might find a place in that tradition. Nevertheless, I believe that what most made me a writer was my early difficulty with language. Being on my grandmother's farm one evening, and I loved to just sit on the steps, because one thing, if you stay there long enough and you're silent long enough in the evenings, they'll forget you're there. You get to hear some great stories. And I can remember one of those evenings I saw a luna moth fluttering up, something I couldn't quite grasp, and I felt like that was the way language was. And over the years, I've gotten to where it's not a problem. Still a few words I cannot pronounce, but it made me pay attention to language in a way I wouldn't have if it'd come easily. Now, almost 5 decades later, language, spoken or written, is no longer out of reach, but it remains just as magical as that bright green moth. What writer would wish it otherwise? My grandfather, who'd grown up on a farm in Buncombe County, could not read and write. And when I was about 5 years old, I had a copy of The Cat in a Hat, and I asked him to read it to me. He was a very proud man, and he didn't want his grandson to know he couldn't read. So he put me on his lap and took out the book and made up a story. And it was very different from the one that my mother had read from that book time and time again. His was different. And actually, I asked him to do it again the following week to read it to me again. I wanted to hear his version. And this time it was different. It was different from the one he had told before. The cat got into a lot more trouble, as I recall. And each time I gave him the book, something would change. And I had this image of words being really magical. It's almost as if they could shape and rearrange themselves. I love working with students at Western Carolina. I love their enthusiasm. I love sharing their frustrations as writers. And sometimes sharing the frustration is as important as sharing the joys. As a teacher, I see students who still read, who still value the imagination, who still have a curiosity about the world, including the natural world. I've always been drawn to water. Even as a child, I would love to go down to the creeks and play in them. And people have noticed that water is very much a part of my work. The novel that has meant the most to me, and if I had to pick a favorite, it would be Serena. I rewrote that book somewhere between 12 and 14 times, and each time it was amazing how much I'd missed before. I've written 14 books now, and I've done well in the United States, and it's done well overseas, and maybe that's very heartening as well, because I think it shows that what I'm writing about is not just about a particular time and place, but there is some universality. When I start to write, very often I'll use a long pad and a pencil. I tell my students I don't want it to look too good too soon. After that, I go to the computer, I run off the copies, and then mark them with a pencil. It's a process, but what I do try to do is put in 3 or 4 hours every day, and that's 6 days a week. And when I'm really writing hard, sometimes it'll go up to 10 or 12 a day. I was a year and a half in at the University of Georgia. I realized I needed to make a commitment to writing, and it had to be something where I really put myself on the line. And so what I did was I dropped out of the PhD program. And I knew by doing that I was taking a real chance. But I felt like I had to do it. I had to kind of make a stand that I'm a creative writer. And I've gotten to the point where I've done it so long that it is a natural part of my daily routine. I have to write. Grandfather, guide my hand to weave with words a thread of truth as I write down your life and other lives. Close kin, but strangers too. Those lives all lived as gears and springs as cotton mill. And let me not forget, your lives were more than that.